Hello. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Gail Ford. I'm the director of the Writers Studio in San Francisco. It's going to be a great reading today. We have 5 really wonderful writers. The San Francisco branch teaches all 4 levels of fiction and poetry, and we teach on Zoom. So if you're ever tempted, come on over. Today, I wanted to start by thanking our writers. They have been, they operate on commitment to thinking deeply and feeling deeply into their subject matter, and then taking the additional step of crafting their discoveries in such a way that I can experience them too. And it's such a gift, and I really appreciate it. It's also the case that I think writing is both a very individual endeavor and a community one. And I know that we all benefit as writers from having other writers to talk to, other writers to read to, other writers to hear from. And community is really important in our classes. And I want to thank Kathy Jacobson, who teaches our level 3 and level 4 classes here. These guys are all from level 4. And Kathy's a wonderful teacher, and they have created together a really wonderful community of support and creativity. So I'm very pleased to be able to introduce them all to you. Okay. So our first reader today is Claire Dodd, and here's her bio. Claire Dodd's work has been published in Columbia Journal Online, Fjords Review, Meridian, The Rumpus, and Sand. She was awarded Meridian's 2020 Ayator's Prize in Prose and received an honorable mention in Glimmer Train's 2019 Short Story Award for New Writers Contest. She lives in San Francisco with her partner and son. Okay, Claire, take it away.
Hi, I'm going to read a few pages from a short story that I'm working on currently. In mid-May of the year 1574, a wax effigy of the first Grand Duke of Tuscany was escorted through the streets of Florence by a funeral procession of such size and splendor that its likes had at that time only been convened for the deaths of 2 men, the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V and Michelangelo, Prince of Artists. For over 3 hours, a macabre spectacle of riderless horses, bishops, banners, noblemen, giant crosses, torches, emissaries, and armed lancers proceeded from the Loggia di Lanza across 2 piazzas and into the depths of San Lorenzo, the Medici family cathedral, which had been entirely transformed. Brunelleschi's white and blue-green architecture was shrouded in black, the chapels were sealed off, and between each chapel stood a mourning skeleton bearing an inscribed scroll. In this manufactured darkness, the catafalque alone shone, surrounded by hundreds of candles and carved in gold. Once the Duke's effigy had been placed upon this bier of light, a small boy with an ornate peacock fan appeared. For the duration of the ceremony, he solemnly chased flies away from the figure's clasped hands and closed eyelids, as if the molded wax was the Grand Duke, and the Grand Duke was simply resting after having expressed a profound desire not to be disturbed. Among those who witnessed that sinister splendor, and whose opinions have survived the accumulating centuries of dust, was Isabella Baldovinetti. 14 years old at the time, she could now see before her the end of her beloved girlhood, and, with some relief and hesitation, was wed to a man who intended to take her to his family's ancestral villa outside Florence once the ceremonies were concluded. The notes in which the 28-year-old Isabella, writing on her deathbed from this villa, attempted to unknot the disturbances in her marriage, beginning with her attendance at this funeral, offer eloquent proof of fear's various sources. As was surely desired by the funeral directors, Isabella remembers the cavalcade of black-robed men swarming the church steps, but the sights she associates most with the Duke's obsequies were not ones that would have been approved by the affair's financial backers, such as the woman she believed she saw following the Duke's entourage with a pair of scissors in her hands, or the man who, not long after selling her new husband a drooping white lily, shoved a short blade into another man's neck, an act she still precisely recalls, Isabella assures us, whenever she smells cut flowers. In the same passage, Isabella reflects that this pairing of cause and effect continues to surprise her over a decade later, as the only odors she could actually smell when the crowd began to heave away from the dying man's blood were horse dung and sweat. Isabella, who claims at this period, owing to a completely sheltered upbringing which aimed solely at securing a desirable marriage, to have only met a handful of men who were not family or servants, writes that she was so affected by the large number of them in the crowd, as well as her new husband's continued presence, that she entered a sort of dream state from which the Duke's funeral was simply the natural continuation of the shock and horror that started on her wedding night, the sort of tribulation through which she believed all new brides must pass. Her dilated attention was continuously drawn to the death's heads the funeral directors had placed inside San Lorenzo's pediments. The following sketch, one of many on the subject in her diaries, should be considered as a kind of curative, in which Isabella attempted to conquer the past by imprisoning it with charcoal and chalk. Isabella furthermore writes that even when fear's first great shocks have passed, one almost never stops trembling. Just as the startling spectacles from the Duke's funeral lurked beneath her thoughts for many years, so too, after passing through the gates of her new home, the immensity of the villa's fortress walls, as well as its towering fountain depicting Hercules breaking Antaeus' back, made a lasting impression on her. She gazed and gazed upon this fountain from her wagon, following the creeping mold along Hercules' calves and buttocks toward the water dripping from Antaeus' open mouth, while the unwritten codes of her husband's family, taught to her the day before by one of the servants, faithful to the ashes, before the family nothing, went through her head. Isabella writes that for years she avoided the villa's open spaces, particularly this fountain, which she could not help but see from her new bedroom's small window. There it lay, always within sight, looming over the dwarf citrus gardens, while beyond it rose the cypress labyrinth, which was later to mean so much to her, and at the furthest remove, the villa's imitation forest. It was a disquieting realization, Isabella writes, when after the death of her second infant son, seeking solitude, she found herself repeatedly drawn to the fountain's cool stone and unceasing trickle, and was obliged to concede that her long-held aversion toward it had been a young girl's bruised naivety, nothing more. This being so, Isabella's advice is not to put too much value in one's own thoughts and emotions, since before long one will feel, if not exactly the opposite, at the very least quite different. Indeed, one may say truth exists only in the moment. For instance, she can only remember the ardor with which she longed to hear her mother's voice, not feel it, try as she might, and she admits that if given the opportunity, she would probably decline to hear her mother speak again, as some things are better left tended by memory than exposed to the present. As a closing remark in this entry, Isabella notes that the fading of grief can be its own loss, and muses that grief, like fear, is never stagnant, and charts paths far beyond its origins. And I'll stop there. Next is Kristen Belshaw, a poet, somatic psychotherapist, mom, and runner. At the Writer's Studio, she explores the healing potential of stories through poetry. She grew up in the Pacific Northwest and draws inspiration from the natural world. Kristen, this is just a reminder to unmute.
Hi, I'm going to read several poems that are all based on recent Writer's Studio exercises. The first one is called The Steeple. My mother filled the kitchen sink with garden lettuce. Her hands, quick flicks of light through water, her flanneled frame haloed by jars of canned plums and green spider plants. She eyed me curiously as I took an offering envelope, stuffed it with my allowance, closed the old blued door, and crunched down the alley in saltwater sandals. The sun beamed through my lemon gingham dress like the God I was searching for, the one who lived in the steeple of the stone church at the end of the block. I walked past the compost heap, green beans in dark, rich soil, radishes and purple berries, past my mother's garden, as sweet and holy as any God. The next one is called Impunity. A table is not a Puritan, not a damp, dried, swollen slab of hunger squared off for sitting, not a pick of kerneled sprout, not brimming or corn-boiled, not a cloud-riddled dream feasting jointly or a long entente, not a settler's pact or bark-hewn battle. An Englishman sits partly, a cobble of neighbors grim, greening rootstock, a transplant. A table is not a truce. A table is not a long tolling pillager feast. I tell of well-tilled earth, a cleft plied peaceless from a mouth, no thanksgiven that worked this soil armed and stretched. Not everyone has a seat. The table is bread severed from stalk, a loud length of history gone. We stand a westward stretch, like sheaves boned, a screech, watching a Puritan still sitting among us. Hunger. I look on the internet and try to erase the condition from the web. I hated the sound of it, hated the fate of it. You know what you do. You type and search and stare at black impervious letters. A still weight replaces your skin, a slick idea you can't get your mind around. After surgery, my world is a clear cut, stumps, trees' limbs, and shredded bark. Steel hands entered my chest, a place I thought only God would ever see. Underbrush exposed, the surgeon felled my overgrowth and took the closest thing to my heart. I turned to the earth. I needed her. Like any great mother, she was suffering too. Her clear running water no longer cold. Wildfires that smolder and ignite. Stitches disappear and leave scars, no matter how thick the vitamin E. I breathed slowly, loved my body inch by inch, smoothed my covers, brushed crumbs from the bed, straightened pill bottles, straightened my hospital gown, and memorized the nurses' names. I imagined bringing them apricot pie, a hunger that would make me want to live. Toast to a daughter. To your skin, your first boundary. To the soft hairs on your nape. To the curl of your floating rib flickering in your gut. To your left foot turned slightly in. To the great Douglas fir. To cedar, magnolia, holly, oak. To phantom limbs, breasts, and glands. Bless the woman walking through this world until she is bereft. Her truth, split from herself, divided like dry earth. I knelt at the hearth, heated my life on the flames of this earth. Forgive me. When I knelt, I was also praying. And the last one I'm going to read is called The Diaper Bag. I never thought I'd be a mother, lavish with wax and words, alone in a room with ink and cool sheets. I spoke in straight lines, minutes divided, small portions kept all to myself. My barrenness, God's punishment for being gay, until my lover sprouted flesh and petaled with a syringe and a prayer. A baby bloomed, bright leaves sprouted like vine. I left nothing for myself. I smashed berries, scooped bright purple with a silver spoon, licked seeds from the bottom of the bowl, opened all the doors, looked for worry in every room. I counted small breaths with my palm, checked for heat and damp, smelled ears and traced soft hairlines, and sang all the Buddhist prayers I could stuff in my diaper bag. Thank you for listening. And now I'm going to introduce our next reader, Michael Kozart. Michael hails from Northern California, where he works in a nonprofit community health center. Since his first class with the San Francisco Writers Studio in 2019, he has published 9 short stories and was awarded the top prize for fiction in the spring 2021 Sixfold Writers Competition.
Greetings. If you're seeing this video, I apologize for not being able to make it to our reading today in person. And this is because we're actually in the midst of a giant storm up here in Sonoma County, and our power is off. I pre-recorded this reading thinking that that is what could happen. So today I am going to read a short story that came out of a writer's studio exercise based on the poem Rewinding an Overdose on a Projector by Sean Shearer. And the title of the story is Hawk. The boy lies on a cot in juvenile hall with cartoon frogs and magic mushrooms stenciled on the walls, wearing thick orange sweatpants and sweatshirt, plastic sandals, and a rubbery wristband printed with his legal name, Maximus Bentley Schneider. He listens to the hoots and shouts reverberating back to rooms like his, all with heavy steel doors and open view toilets. He floats back to upright. The styrofoam plate of fish sticks, powdered potatoes, and boiled broccoli, untouched and cold, on the rust-red floor, levitates into his hand that reaches for the slit in the door from where another hand returns the plate to a trolley of identical meals rolled back to the kitchen where cooks in hairnets restore the food to giant vats and trays. The previous day, he backpedals to the entry station at Juvenile Hall, where information is withdrawn from a computer and transferred to his trembling mouth. Then he walks back to the patrol car, where a 5-point harness seals him against the hard plastic seat for the reverse to the main county jail, where he's detained in a holding cell, then escorted backwards to the booking station, ink from the paper imprinting his fingers, the flash of a mugshot, the cuffs tight on his wrists. He's the prime suspect, identified in the crowd of other students, parents, teachers, and neighbors, transfixed by the Monday morning pile of rubble, twisted metal, and embers, retracting steam, reconstituting into the ranch-like structure of Fulton High that sucks in fire and smoke at 3 a.m. The flames retreat to the origin near the main doorway, through which kids of all shapes and sizes regress at the start of each ordinary day. A wave of incandescent blue withdraws to the point of initial contact with a wooden match, flaming bright, which arcs back to the hand of the boy, reverse striking the box, not a moment before the butane that has moistened the wall converges into the nozzle of the white plastic squeeze bottle where it is safely stored. Standing in the cold night, matchbox in one hand, lighter fluid in the other, he thinks back to the previous Friday afternoon when he counts down to the start of his detention in the principal's office, while outside in the main hall, kids laugh viciously and inhale the phlegm that oozes in stainless steel drinking fountains before they utter the onomatopoetic word hawk, which, when said backwards, sounds exactly like cough. Hawk, the word that returns either way to so many young pairs of lungs. Earlier that day, Friday, the phone regurgitates his mother's cries while, on the other end of the line, the principal sits in his wood-veneered office, speaking back the typed incident report that comes to the schoolyard proctor who, in the morning, strains his back before flinging boys into the dusty scrum of fists and legs, the scrum that collapses to a single punch that reloads into the tense arm of the lone boy that started it all at the beginning of the pre-lunch recess. The boy that's never seen trouble or thrown a punch. He is in the yard, trembling in rage as Hawk, or rather its reverse, echoes off the walls of Fulton High, and none of the school officials are willing to do anything about it, to strike at the source, to get at the origin. It's the sound of yuck coming from lungs, but also the word that everyone recognizes as a reduction of ham hock, a popular synonym for gluteus maximus, the awareness of which traces back to a scene in science class earlier in the week when the students focus on a large poster that shows an illustrated man lacking skin. All the muscle groups that need to be memorized are rendered in Latin, the great root of English. Gluteus maximus. The entire class, including the teacher, slurps up laughter to the moment that someone connects the name Maximus to butt, meaning that the boy with a funny name, who no one likes anyway, is the butt of all jokes. Maximus Bentley Schneider, sitting in the front row. He thinks back to that first day of high school when his full name appears in plain print on the list of homeroom assignments for all to see. Previously in middle school, he'd been just Max to those that know him, easier to pronounce than Maximus, harder for enemies to make fun of. And it could be Max once more if he could travel back before juvenile hall, county jail, the arrest, the burning, the hacking snot, before the words hawk, ham hock, and gluteus maximus, which are, in fact, evil names, before the teacher that thinks that kids need to roll with the punches and that names strengthen character, before middle school, lower school, before a new PlayStation, reversing steps to a crawl, stripping underwear back to diapers, first words to inchoate babbling, shifting lips from bottle to breast, all the way back to when, on a cold midwinter day, he slides, feet first, kicking and screaming through his mother's vagina and, with reverse peristalsis, to a higher, warmer place where he first hears the pulsating rush of blood like the waves of some great ocean before everything has a name. So now it is my pleasure to introduce Maurya Kerr. Maurya Kerr is a Bay Area-based writer, educator, and artist whose poetry appears in multiple journals. Much of her artistic work across disciplines is focused on Black and brown people reclaiming their birthright to wonderment. A Pushcart Prize nominee, her work was recently chosen by Jericho Brown as runner-up in Southern Humanities Review's 2021 Auburn Witness Poetry Prize. Maurya is currently a UC Berkeley Arts Research Center Poetry and the Census Fellow. Maurya, can you please unmute?
Thank you for coming. And I just want to say, like, we have such a great writing class. I just want to thank Kathy, who's our leader in charge. I feel like everything that I've learned about craft has been through the Writer's Studio. And again, I'm an amazing group of writers who inspire me weekly. So just wanted to start with that. I am going to read 3 poems. All of them, again, come from Writer's Studio exercises. And yeah, so I'll start my first of 3. This is called Venge. The man hits you, throws you, pins you. So you pray to mother, to father, to the land you never knew, but that land knows a tongue you do not speak, and your plaint lays unheard. This is how the fastened loosen. So you pray to the not mother nor father of the land. This one here beneath the dirt floor, beneath the creaked bed, beneath you, beneath this hand, the man who is still under God. This land you know not by choice, but by force, but still till, sweat, love. This bare bone unmuled land that God above you and you beneath the man, God help you, will never hold your beautiful bones. Your bones are meant for more, for some kind of glory. This you know. Minutes later, it's done. The man stands, the man walks to the door, the man opens the door, the man leaves, the door slams, the man has left. This is how the loosened sharpened. Behold the scythe, how it cuts. You stay still, open door, shut door, walk out a ways beneath this God-watched land, sit down, lay down, wait. You lose count of birds flown by, the times you swallow, blink, lick your lips. By dusk, you've decided. Your husband doesn't ask why you're lying beneath the sun in this muleless land, swallowing, blinking, licking your lips. He knows, waits. You rise, walk toward. Normally you lay together on the creaked bed beneath God and sky when he comes home weary bone. But tonight you both stand in the dirt floor room, quiet, dark. This is how the sharpened glisten. It is easy enough to find the man, kill the man. You and your husband bury the man, sour bone, deep beneath the land, beneath your goddamn gloried body, beholding heaven beneath God. The smell of blood like newly slaked late summer soil, like copper, like shine. Behold the scythe, how it reaps beneath God beheld. This is how the glistened fasten, how black steadfasts, how a woman withstands. Plow the dead, harrow the fallow, till the bloody, sow. Then wait, bone, wait. Okay, my next poem is called Dorothy Dandridge on White Men in Hollywood. We know how to play the part, been trained our whole damn lives. They can be the father and we the naughty daughter. They'll pretend to love us and we'll pretend to care. They major to our minor, all jive and ill-advise. They husband, we knived. They knife, we wound. They fuck us for a buck. They cheat us, maltreat us, and swindle as we dwindle down to droop. They be the surgeon to our unsedated patient, the cop pulling us over for a traffic stop. We hands overhead, we tits up on the bed. They ashore, we a-sea. They sea air, we whole. They heave, we hoisted. They itch, we heisted. They throw, we pitch. They buy, we sold. They lord, we slave. They alive, we died. They head, we hoe. They home, we less. They gun, we flesh. They cock, we shot. They rock, we scissor. They scissors, we paper. They papers, we never had. And my last poem is called A Toast to the Enslaved and to the Free. To your twilight, tooth and eye, to the listening of trees to limbs. to the beaten and not, to the swing that stops, to a son's mouth shoved full of his own cut parts, bound shut, shut. To the cotton bowl who knew only to blossom, surprised to soak up blood. To the whip and rope whose prayers were lost in the noise and shame of their misuse. To shelter that seldom was, to rivers that swallowed your scent, your scent. To the stacked as spoons who learned to be knives, to scabs tried to stay but forced to go, to scars grown into maps that say, this is the way, go there, go there. To gust and beast that licked your umber skin. Oh, bless each creature I have loved and still love. And Lord, blessed be a blessed speed for the mama whose child was wakened, only to be put dead again, again. This world so bright, bright. Thank you all for listening. Our last reader is Cecile Barlier. And Cecile was born in France and received her master's degree for the Sorbonne University in Paris. For over 2 decades, she has lived in the United States, where she is raising her family and working as an entrepreneur. Her debut collection, A Gypsy's Book of Revelations, won the 2019 Grace Paley Prize for Short Fiction. Her short stories, A Gypsy's Book of Revelations and Forgetting, have been nominated for the Pushcart Prize.
Hi, I will read an excerpt from one of the stories of my book, A Gypsy's Book of Revelation. The story is titled Full of Grace, and it explores an unlikely fling between a very pregnant woman and a young seminarist. This is the time of their first encounter. It was one of those Indian summer mornings, and I was drowning crispy warm bread in my Benedicts while trying to read Time magazine and occasionally lifting my head to watch the news. The boy had been sitting kitty-corner to me under one of the windows. I watched him whenever I felt he would notice. He had a pack of Lucky Strikes next to a large foamy cup of coffee, but more interestingly, he wore the white collar of a Roman Catholic priest. With the milky skin of a redhead, albeit no trace of red in his washed blonde hair, the boy looked terribly young, a youth incompatible with priesthood, I decided. "You don't look like you're from around here," he said from across the room, obviously noticing I had been watching. "Probably because I'm not," I responded. That morning, we had the diner all to ourselves, and the 3 of us must have formed an odd triangle of a kind: the child priest, the Icelandic beauty, and me, the overgrown mother-to-be. It created a strange atmospheric imbalance, almost imperceptible, like the gravity of an ever so slightly slanted plane where marbles are put in slow motion. I stood up and strode between the tables toward the boy, a gush of motherly hormones giving me sudden confidence. "Hi, I'm Hélène, and there's no hiding I'm from France. What's your name?" I asked. He stood up too quickly, almost kicking his chair to the floor in the process. He wasn't wearing a full robe, just a black colorino and matching black pants, both floating a little on a thin frame. The church hadn't yet covered his body in full. The boy was still permitted a bit of manliness. "Hi, Thomas," he said. He raised a hand in a begging gesture for me to catch it, and we shook hands like strangers are supposed to do on a first meet. It was a peculiar motion, exclusive, which made the diner and the Icelandic waitress lose color. Although it lasted only seconds, the focus was so intense that I felt like a child myself, my head tilted over a difficult drawing in progress. My tongue stuck from the corner of my mouth. We weren't looking at each other, we were looking at our hands, as if they were detached from us. "Do you mind?" I said, gesturing to the chair across from him. "Oh, please, by all means," he said, and grabbed the back of the chair to make room. then placed it gently under me as I sat. I always liked the rules of etiquette. In that moment, the boy had marked 10 points right off the bat. Are you from Pasadena yourself, Thomas? No, I came here to study, he said. Besides, very few are true Pasadenian. The last of the natives must have left in the first half of the 19th century. Interesting you would say that, I whispered. You mean interesting that an American would make any historical reference at all, he said abruptly. I paused and observed him, not gratifying him with a response that would have been either untruthful or would appear so in any case. I was growing curious of this mixture of shy politeness and awkward passion. His face had moved forward over his neck, which now exhibited a web of tendons and veins, framing the protruding Adam's apple. His eyes had opened up, and their color was as puzzling as the boy himself. A paragon of in-between. A greenish brown gleaming toward blue under the direct light flowing from the window. I decided to let the boy reflect on his question and how he had thrown it at me from a slingshot of his soul. Soul was, after all, the groundwork from which he had chosen to elevate his career, and it was fair that his question would fire right back. The silence was deliciously awkward. I don't know why I said that, he said now in a low voice, a red surge flowing from the white rectangle of his collar straight up to the cheekbones. There was some firework under his skin. I started laughing. One of those deep, honest laughs that rose from below the lungs. It was uncontrollable, like a hiccup, an irritation of the nerves that kept building itself up to an apogee. It wasn't a discreet chuckle, nothing Anglo-Saxon about it. It was pure Latin guttural hysteria, which fired across the room and ricocheted against the wall. I overpowered him, and it didn't take long for him to join me. The boy had guts. He kept pulling at his Catholic collar while his eyes had disappeared under an array of solar wrinkle. I liked that.
That was fabulous, you guys. Can my whole body clap? This is too small. One of the things that I think is so remarkable is how much your voices enter me on those words. I can feel it in my body, I can feel it in my brain, I can feel it in my heart, and I so appreciate your craft and commitment. So thank you all for coming. It's lovely to have an audience. Thank you for all the things that you've put in chat. It's been really fun to see wonderful, powerful, made me tear up, etc., etc. And all of the readers will have an opportunity to read through those afterwards. So that's it for the reading. Joel has an important announcement. Thank you again for coming.